we'll go over like kind of an awesome. We'll go over an outline of like how this day is going to look and how this class is going to look, and the broad strokes of how I have this set up. But there will be, for the most part, I want to ask everyone, since there are so many of us, to like, if any questions come up for you, that's part of why I wanted to give everybody notes, is so you have stuff to go home with. There's like a lot of information in this presentation. So if you have any questions that come up, write them down. Folks who are joining virtually, you can add them in the chat. And then once we're done with the full presentation today, virtual folks can ask any questions that they have first, and then IRL folks can head to the herb buffet bar that everyone so lovingly set up. And then we can, anybody who can stick around and has questions to ask, we can like chat and kind of do more of an informal Q&A. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Yes.
Would it be okay if I got a copy of your slides?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is like 6 or 7 pages of notes. So I think my goal with the notes was to have most of them, like the most prudent information from the slides.
I know someone who's studying herbology and they want to like use it for community care purposes, and basically exactly what you're talking about. So that would be cool to send to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you're welcome to like get an extra copy of notes to share with them too. I have a little mini sign over here on the buffet bar with my business card, and also like, I'm not super active on social media, but with my like contact info and all that stuff too. All right. We can go ahead and get started. Anybody else have any questions? Please feel free to take care of yourselves, move around, lay on the ground. I'm like a very informal teacher, and I want to be forthright in that I am like very underslept today. So if the pace of this, if you need me to like slow down, the pace might kind of vary throughout the day just because I'm very foggy brain today. But so yeah, we can get going. So this is a version of a class that I'll tell you like a little bit about myself. Corey gave me a basic intro, but I've been doing this work by myself and in community for about the last 7 or 8 years. Before that, I was an events and arts journalist and a stand-up comedian. So my life took like a pretty hard left because it just, lots of things happened in my life. And I felt this really strong pull to start working with plant medicine. And I had like no idea where it would take me. But in 2018, I started my business, which is Manatee Medicinals, which is kind of an ever evolving community effort to really just like make self-care and community care resources and education available to everyone. And I'm leaning more into teaching in community, which has been really difficult during the pandemic as a disabled person. So it means so much to me that you're all here today, and that the space has been crafted so intentionally, because that's not really the way that it is basically everywhere else. So thanks a lot. So this is our day. The kind of first main chunk of this presentation is some contextual. Thank you so much. You're an angel. Oh, this is perfect. Yay. This is something I could have done before I arrived here today, but I didn't. Thank you, Corey. So the first chunk of this presentation is just like some foundational basics about like, what do we think about self-care? What does that mean? And a lot of this information kind of comes from my experience, like my lived experience as a chronically ill person, and also as an herbalist, about what it means to have a toolbox in your life with different practices and modalities and plants and other allies that you can carry with you throughout your life. So that's the first chunk. The next chunk is herbal medicine perspectives, which is like different cultural perspectives, herbal actions and like what that means, and also different forms of medicine. So we're going to talk about tinctures, about teas, and like a brief overview of some other stuff. They're going to have kind of an informal 5-minute bathroom snack and integration break because it is a lot of information. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk more specifics about, there are 2 classes of herbs that we're going to be talking about today, nervines and adaptogens or adaptogenic herbs. So we're going to be getting into more specifics about that and how we can work with them. Then we're going to do online folks Q&A, and then we're going to break out into doing some tea blending if folks are able to stick around for that. And if you have to leave early, please feel free to like, you don't have to make an announcement, like please feel free to go ahead and blend yourself a tea. There are spoons and different kinds. There's some paper bags and some little plastic baggies over there as well. So help yourself. Those are for everyone. And for context, today's class will not be going into any specifics about any major specifics about trauma, about sex, or about sexual violence. So just like heads up about that. But we will be referencing and exploring different ways that trauma, PTSD, stress, and chronic health issues can impact and influence our bodies, minds, and spirits as we move through the world. And we'll be moving through some foundational concepts around whole body health, exploring different practices and herbal allies that can assist and support us on our journeys back home to ourselves. Let's get into it. So, a very quick, brief hand raise. Like, what do you think of when you hear the term self-care?
I think of like parenting myself, kind of, like putting the phone down and going to bed at a reasonable hour, things like that.
Parenting yourself, and yeah, that's great. Anyone else? If there's not like a right or wrong answer, it's just like associations, like culturally.
Yeah. Kind of taking time, slowing down, and being really purposeful with how you interact with you and yourself. It's purely for you.
That's great. Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think the term self-care is really trite and I kind of hate it because I think that it's a lot of the work that I'm getting into right now is having conversations in community about wellness culture and how like exploitative and kind of nebulous it is in the current context of like the nightmare world that we all live in. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from, is that self-care is important, but it is also something that is also this term that kind of has been commercialized and like warped through this grotesque lens to be like, why aren't you taking care of yourself when like being a person is exhausting and like there's this incredibly violent world and society around us. Yeah, that's what I think of when I think about self-care. It's like, you know, yeah. And it means so much more, you know, it does mean something different to everybody. I think it's a neutral term. I'm bringing a lot of chaotic bisexual energy to this slideshow today. So some of the slides, some of the pictures in this slideshow are really goofy and I just wanted to keep them there. And some are like pictures I took myself. I don't know what this is, but I liked it. So trauma and self-care and community care can, and I think do like look and feel different for everyone, right? Like your needs and preferences, they will change over time. And when I was in college, when I was in my 20s, I wish that I had been given not only more tools, but more perspective about what the fact that like not only who you are is going to change time and time again, and you'll be several different versions of yourself throughout your life, but like what you need or what you like or what relaxes you or what excites you, like all of those things and your desires, those things are going to change a lot over time. And I don't think that we talk a whole lot about that culturally. Yeah, we're in this cultural moment where there's an influx of information about how much money you should spend, or making an investment in yourself, right? Or talking heads around this wellness culture and healing processes and self-care. And that can feel really overwhelming if you're poor, if you're traumatized, if you're, I don't know, just people coming from different backgrounds show up in different ways for ourselves and each other. So there's a lot of pressure to like constantly be on a healing journey and for that journey to be linear. But that isn't really how life works. And that dissonance is a big part of how I approach talking about these topics. As a trauma survivor myself, I just really want to stress that anything that I teach or share or talk about, you are lovingly invited to take what resonates with you and explore what interests you and leave the rest. You could maybe agree with nothing I talk about here today, and that would be fine. It's my perspective and my experiences. So yeah, I just want to name that, and that there's this kind of top-down hierarchical way to like, well, have you tried ashwagandha? Or like, well, why don't you just go do yoga if you're just stressed out? And it's exhausting to try to, it can feel really exhausting, the pressure to heal the way that the people around you seem to be healing, or to be in your body. Like, well, why don't you feel safe in your body? You should really work harder on that. And it's not, I don't know, it's not really how it goes. Yes, please.
I'd love to add to that, like, I think so much of like the toxic, exhausting, like wellness culture that you're talking about is that way because it's so like individualized, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously it's like capitalism, heavily white supremacy, like, you know, so much of trauma healing, what that actually looks like, at least for me, has been like existing in the community.
Thank you so much. Thanks for, what's your name?
Catherine.
Catherine. Hi, Catherine. Thank you for naming that. Catherine is talking about how these things are all influenced by white supremacy and individualism, and that's definitely like part of what we're going to talk about today. And this is, anything I talk about is not meant to be a how-to necessarily. Your path and journey are your own, and there's a difference between like gently pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to explore new things and trying to force something that doesn't fit or feel good for you in the present moment. Just a really basic definition, because we'll be referencing it today, like what an acute versus chronic health issue is. My take is that an experience is that like an acute condition is something that is a little bit more temporary and usually lasts, you know, like under 6 months, something like a broken bone or a different state of being in your body for a while, but it's something that is generally alleviated, versus a chronic health issue, which is something that lasts for like 6 months or longer, or is a persistent issue in your life, whether that's emotional or spiritual or physical. So what is homeostasis? If your body is in homeostasis, everything in your body is relatively balanced and internal conditions remain stable and relatively constant. This is a term that I am sure I learned in 8th grade biology, but it didn't register with me. I grew up in like a household with two chronically ill parents who definitely wouldn't have considered themselves that. But yeah, I didn't have an idea that I was not brought up with the concept that like anything going on in my body or my heart or my mind is like my body, your body is constantly trying to recalibrate itself and come back to center, come back to a state of balance. Sometimes it can feel like our bodies and minds are betraying us in the moment. Ongoing issues like anxiety, depression, PTSD, panic attacks, heart palpitations, or digestive distress. Seems like our bodies are fighting us. And that's language that I used to be steeped in a lot of like, my body hates me, my body hates me. And I would say that to myself all the time, not realizing that like, that wasn't a very kind way to talk to myself, and that it didn't leave a lot of room for shifting things. So the opposite is true. Our bodies are fighting for us, and through good and bad, our internal organ systems are these incredibly complex systems that are literally designed to rewrite and to reroute themselves. So many of those issues are our bodies alerting us to perceived danger, you know, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We are not often given the space or tools to even listen to our body's needs, let alone to self-regulate in healthier ways. So self-regulation is a mechanism that can involve the ability to take a pause between a feeling and an action. So taking the time to think things through, make a plan, wait patiently. And I've learned over time that for me, getting to a place of safety within myself means that I have developed and am developing like the capacity to respond to things versus react. And self-awareness is like this conscious knowledge of one's own feelings, motives, and desires, and the ability to understand and manage our behavior, our reactions to feelings and things happening around us. So our nervous systems are constantly seeking safety and rest and repair in order to return to homeostasis. Like internally, that's actually what's happening, even if it doesn't feel like it. So in the external conditions, part of what we're talking about today is how can we, with all of the stress that exists outside of ourselves in the world, how can we help support our inner world? How can we support that natural process of homeostasis through self-regulation, through working with different tools like plant medicine? And you know, it's through building tools over time. So building and just talking a little bit about what it means to build a toolbox, what it means to like build resilience. As humans, we're naturally resilient, but that doesn't mean that we don't need help, love, care, support, and guidance, especially as we grow older and live through a stressful and traumatic pandemic. We need to expand outside of ourselves and however we were raised to think or act, and our personal experiences to build our resilience. And resilience is not just bare knuckling it through life and enduring hardship after hardship endlessly and just being like, well, it is the way it is, which is like what everybody says where I'm from, and I'm from Southern Ohio, in the Midwest. And it's just like, well, this is just the way my body is. I'm just in horrendous pain every day, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm gonna drink, or I don't know, or whatever, whatever your coping mechanisms are. Resilience can be about taking an active stance in our own lives and building a healing path forwards. And it is also, as you mentioned, it's something we can't do in isolation. So that's part of what we'll be looking at today is not just like using a plant as a medicine in this kind of transactional, like resource-based way, but building relationships with the land around us, with getting to know different kinds of trees, getting to know what kinds of plants grow on our street, and being able to identify them and say, hello, friend. And through the different practices and plants we'll be talking about today, we can expand upon that to build this toolbox that we can refer back to again and again. Well, healing is really our birthright, and it can't happen in isolation or in a vacuum. Deepening our connections with each other and plants and animals and the earth will ultimately help us to maintain our health and to improve our relationship with ourselves. It doesn't all happen at once. It is an ongoing practice that spans over your whole life. And what does it mean to take responsibility for our own health? Each person's body is different, but these are some general human needs that we can prioritize to help shift chronic or acute imbalances in our health. So I'm going to zoom through this a little bit, but sleep health is really difficult to maintain in our society. But I put it up top because in my experience, focusing on sleep health when I have focused on sleep health in my life, it has balanced every other system in my body, and it helps to, to kind of right the whole ship. Nutrition and hydration, meaning like whatever that looks like for you, which will change and shift over time. But yeah, a diet that supports you personally and feeling balanced and keeping your body and brain hydrated and functional. Discovering what movement is enjoyable to you, whatever that is, moving when and how you're able. Whether that's dancing or mindful movement or gentle yoga, swimming, walks, and then spiritual health and energetic hygiene, which is also something I wish that someone had talked to me about much earlier on in my life, because it's really important. And all of these things can be woven in with herbal work, and yeah. Okay, so what is herbal medicine? Herbal medicine is the art and science of using herbs for promotion of health and treating and preventing disease. So herbalists can be lots of things. I consider myself like an intuitive folk herbalist. That's how I identify. Herbalists can be naturopaths, they can be acupuncturists, farmers, harvesters, midwives, writers, medical herbalists, clinical herbalists, healers, grandmothers, anyone who practices some therapeutic usage and study of plant medicine. Just about every culture and civilization on Earth has a history of working with plant medicine. It's a long series of many practices and approaches that have been developed by many hands, voices, and brains over the course of thousands of years of human evolution. This is kind of a jam-packed slide, but it's really important to me to talk about because my perspective is like a mixed perspective of studying both Western and traditional Chinese medicine, and also traditional African-American folk healing. That's the perspective that I'm coming from. But in the West, and particularly in North America, anytime we're talking about herbal medicine, it is often coming from a Western perspective. So AKA colonized, right? It's very individualistic. It's very allopathic or like MD medicine focused. So it's often very focused on treating individual symptoms versus the whole person. So an individual symptom could be a respiratory illness or a cough or depression, or I'm trying to think of another example, but it's often focused on like a singular aspect of what you're going through versus like, well, do you have enough food? Like, are you safely housed? Do you only eat salt? Like it doesn't look at the whole person. And there's also, it's not to say that it's all bad, it's just like that's often the perspective that Western herbalism is looking through versus traditional indigenous medicine systems and African systems, which are very ancient, the most ancient, and very based on sacred teachings, on intuition, and on relationality. So an estimated 80% of the population in developing countries still depend on traditional medicine for their primary healthcare needs. And honestly, I feel like in the West, we're like very far behind in that regard. We're kind of just catching up. So plants are a gateway medicine. Getting to know them can lead you to a greater capacity for developing trust and intuition with yourself, being able to self-soothe and care for your own emotional and physical health in the moment, and working, it can also work really effectively along with other therapies that you're doing. So if you're just starting therapy for the first time, or you're starting to see a body worker to get massages, or you're going to acupuncture, herbs are a really great tool that you can use alongside with that. And you can talk with your practitioners about what you're working with, and kind of develop an intentionality about what your goals are and how you want to feel in your body. So plant medicine can assist us very deeply in the process of recovering from trauma, from PTSD, addiction, grief, chronic illness. A very common experience with all of those things is that it can be very difficult for us to recognize, to name, or to acknowledge our needs and our feelings and emotions. There's often a lot of like pain and noise and chatter in our nervous systems that kind of almost create like a radio static between yourself and your body. And it makes it really difficult to listen to somebody ask you what you need, and you're like, I don't fucking know. I don't know what I need. I have no idea. So it can become kind of this dark veil that's difficult to see through, but plant medicine can help us to work through that and to experience our emotions versus just thinking about our emotions or intellectualizing our emotions, or repressing them, or tamping them down, or numbing, or ignoring them, all the different things we can do with our emotions except feel them, right? There's also spiritual herbalism, which I'm just, I don't know, giving a little bit of a nod to here. We're talking about teas and infusions. Probably everybody here has had a cup of tea at some point in their lives. It's often the first way that we get introduced to working with plants. I love tea. Tea is so valid, and it is so, it can be very simple, it can be very accessible, affordable. You can buy tea or bulk herbs with SNAP EBT. It's a very potent way to supplement with vitamins and minerals. it's a grounding ritual, right? There's a taste, there's the temperature, there's the smell. It's a very sensory experience. And sometimes you can, if you feel like you're really scattered and you're so stressed out and you don't know where to start, sometimes the simplest thing is a great place to start. It's like, let me start with, I'm going to have a cup of chamomile tea every night after I finish my work or whatever. And you can use that as a focus point for building on top of it. Maybe you can add things like, I'm going to do 10 minutes of stretching and have a cup of tea. That's what I love about tea, is just the, it's so easy to work with, and you don't need a lot of extra tools or gear or supplies. It's a great way to hydrate also, and to replace like sodas or alcohol or coffee. And it's also a great way to like meet different allies. If you get a variety tea box at grocery outlet or something, you can try 6 different herbs and see how they make you feel, before you go and spend $30 on the supplement that you're not sure you want to invest in. And just a nice note about kind of a cup of tea versus a therapeutic dose of tea. A therapeutic dose of herbal tea is considered to be like 3 to 5 cups of a strong tea blend, like per day. And then an infusion, which is what's pictured here in this mason jar, is a larger amount of herbs. It's not an exact science, but more than a little tea bag. And it's steeped for a longer amount of time. You can do hot or cold infusions. And that can be a fantastic, honestly, infusions can be, especially if you're fatigued or burnt out and you're out of your multivitamin, making like a really big nettle tea infusion is basically a giant multivitamin. It's a great way to not only hydrate, but to like supplement with additional vitamins and minerals. And we'll talk about tinctures. Has anybody here worked with a tincture medicine before? Yeah. Vaguely familiar? Who here has never heard of a tincture before? Cool. Great. Yay. I love getting to explain this. That's what I'm here for. So a tincture is a solution of a medicinal substance, and it's usually in an alcohol solvent. So the dry or the fresh or powdered herb is placed in what's called a menstruum. So the menstruum can be alcohol, it can be apple cider vinegar, or it can be vegetable glycerin, or it can be a combination of those. And you're basically steeping these herbs in a jar and shaking it a little bit every day. And it extracts the medicinal properties from the plant. And then at a certain point, you strain it. Usually a minimum time to steep a tincture is like a month. Sometimes you can leave it for like up to a year or even longer. And then you strain it out and you're taking small amounts of this tincture every day. Totally different depending on what your intention and goal is, and also on what the plant is. The dosages vary widely, but yeah, ultimately you're taking a few, a dropperful to a few dropperfuls of this herb a day. And yeah, glycerin, if you're like a person who it's a very small amount of alcohol that you're taking with this, like tincture bottles are this big. But if you're a person who like absolutely cannot have any alcohol in your system at all for whatever reason, glycerin it's very sweet, and it's often less harsh than apple cider vinegar or alcohol, and it's great medicine for pets, for children, and also for like the elderly or the medically fragile. It's a lot gentler on the system. Here's one of the other weird pictures I found. I kept it. That frog's having a self-care day. Get it, frog. Chicken back. having a small wine glass of calendula tincture. Here's an important note about tinctures and concentrates. As opposed to with like over-the-counter meds or pharmaceutical meds, where we think about like, my back hurts more, so I'm going to take more ibuprofen. I'm going to take 600 milligrams now. I'm going to take 600 milligrams in the morning when I wake up. Sometimes less is more with plant medicine, and that can be a surprisingly difficult concept to wrap our heads around in our culture, because we're very like more of everything all the time. And like, especially with flower essences, which we'll talk about later, which are different from a tincture, or even with just with a tincture. A general rule that I go by, even with years of experience with different things, is when I'm trying something new, I might just take a drop of it, a single drop in my mouth, to see like, what does it taste like? How does it make me feel? Does it make me perk up? Like, does it make me go like, ah? Sometimes it can be great to start with like 1 to 10 drops of a tincture at a time, and see how you feel that day, and then kind of scale up from there. And if you're interested in working with plant medicine, if you're starting to, even if it's just a tea infusion, keeping a journal or somehow being able to keep track of your experiences, even if it's just writing down a sentence every day of how you're feeling, can be a really great way to measure, or just keep track over time of, is this feeling effective for me? Do I need to talk to somebody about changing dosages or working, adding something else? We can talk about herbal vinegars. Basically the same process as I just talked about with tinctures, except the menstruum is always vinegar, and often combined with honey, depending on what your like intent is. So if you ever see these goofy bottles at like infused vinegars at the grocery store, or at like TJ Maxx or something, they'll have like infused olive oil and like an infused, a rosemary infused vinegar thing. That's what that is. So vinegar is much less shelf stable than alcohol. An oxymel or a vinegar can last on the shelf, like in my experience, definitely under 2 years, usually a year, depending on what it is, versus tincture medicine. If it's just alcohol, that extract is good for like 9 to 10 years, which is always really wild to me. Something can be, it'll lose potency a little bit over time, but vinegars are a really fun additional way to add nutrient content to your food, to take a spoonful in the morning before you eat. If you're a person who has really sluggish or slow digestion, or like incomplete digestion, or even like GERD or things like that, and talk with your doctor about it if you have like chronic GI stuff. But often the first thing any naturopath will tell you is like, for the love of God, start drinking apple cider vinegar, because it can really help balance the pH in your stomach. But even in small amounts, it can just be really beneficial to your health over time. And it's another form of food as medicine. It's also very cheap. Because you can buy apple cider vinegar at the grocery store. Okay. So here's some other methods of using herbs as medicine. So a decoction is somewhat similar to an infusion, but a decoction is for anything that is like heavier, like physically heavier, like cloves, cardamom, dried ginger, dried roots, barks, and berries is usually, because those things are dense and often have like a hard shell or casing on them, versus like lavender or spearmint, which are leaves, right? They're very light. And how long do you steep a cup of lavender tea for? It's like 3 to 10 minutes, you know? So a decoction is for harder materials that you are simmering on the stove for anywhere between 10 minutes to 40 minutes, depending on what it is. And there's also powdered dried herbs, which you can take in capsules or mixed in hot water. We can use aromatherapy, aromatherapy can be a candle with, you know, pardon me, with like herbs in it. But aromatherapy is it's not just essential oils. Aromatherapy can be sitting with your cup of lavender tea and smelling it and enjoying that experience. But it can also be using essential oils in a spray bottle or like put on a tissue and put in your pillowcase. Topical medicine is the core of what I make in my practice. I make a lot of salves and bath salts, and like massage oils that are infused with different herbs. It's a wonderful way to work with plant medicine, combined with different things for relaxation. I'm a big proponent of bath medicine, and it's a really big part of my practice. So I have some big muslin baggies, like cotton muslin baggies. I brought a handful of them that are over on the table over there. So that's what those are for. If you want to make a tea to steep in the bath, I invite you to do so, because if you haven't done it before, it's really nice. And then again, food is medicine, which can be adding fresh or dried herbs to food. Thyme, holy basil, black pepper, cinnamon, ginger, sage. You're already working with herbal medicine if you have a spice cabinet. These are some of the things that I make. So these are some of my bath salties that I make, which are infused with different oils, trying to get away from using essential oils because they're a really wasteful process, but they sure do smell nice. That's calendula, the main flower that you see there. And then this is my pain zap salve, which is the main salve that I make, which has CBD and like 15 other botanicals in it. And then that's pain zap salve in the crock pot.
Each of these have like a different intended effect. What are the different effects?
Yeah, they asked what are the different effects of these things, or what are the intentions. The baths that I make kind of spiritual and emotional, I call them bath salt teas. So I make these spiritual baths that are for kind of different emotional or physical states. So the one pictured here is called Swamp Witch Skin Support, and it has chamomile and lang lang and calendula and turmeric. It has turmeric powder stirred into it. So it turns your bathtub, it stains your bathtub yellow for like a few weeks, but it feels really good. So that one is like intended for skin support, and it's really, my intention with it was like for winter time when our skin is often red or dry or cracked. It's like very moisturizing. And then with the salve, the main salve that I make is for pain relief. So for like joint pain, muscle pain, injury recovery, it's also really good for scar healing.
Is the top right one different too?
The top right one is what's also in the jar. So that's the version of it when it's steeping in oil. And then I like strain it out of the oil. I strain the herbs out of the oil. And then I add beeswax or a vegan candelilla wax to the oil, and then it becomes a salve. So that's what that is. And we are at our break point, actually. So if we're cool with show of hands, is everybody who wants a break? I want a break. Okay, we'll be back in 5 minutes to start talking about herbal actions and things. Thanks, everyone. Oh, please. Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for handling that. All right, y'all, thank you for indulging the break. Do I need to do anything on this end?
I unmuted you already.
Okay, thanks. All right, all good to go. Everybody got hydrated, getting a snack. So maybe save the more exciting parts for last. It was a little top loaded of presentation. But we're going to start talking about some specific plants and going through some medicinal herbal actions. So an herbal action is a word to describe. All right. Just to describe a specific medicinal quality or property of a plant. Most plants, at least in my experience, have more than one action. So a plant can be a nervine and an adaptogen. A plant can be antispasmodic and a nervine. So learning the language of plants, you could have an entire life of experiences with herbal medicine and never know any of this. And your experience would be just as valid, just from like your felt lived experience. But I think that learning the languages of plants helps to not only bridge the gap between people and plants, but from my perspective, it is crucial to know exactly what each plant does before you work with it. And especially when it comes to, you're not going to harm yourself with a cup of tea, but I think when working with specifically like supplements, like capsules or tinctures, they are strong. They can be really strong and they can interact with medications and even birth control. So I think especially as anxious or traumatized people, knowing what we're getting into a little bit before we work with it and learning more about how that plant functions in our body can help create, I don't know, maybe a more even experience for you. And it can also like help alleviate anxiety about like, what is this? What can I generally expect this tincture to do versus just like stabbing in the dark and hoping that it will go okay. So like I was saying, it's important to keep in mind that a single herb can have numerous actions and they should never be pigeonholed into like only doing that one thing. So often their actions are synchronized and work together in a way that will benefit the whole body as a whole system and on multiple levels. So like lavender, for example, is, we'll talk about in a minute, is like a nervine relaxant. And it's also like aromatherapeutic and it smells really good. And that's intentional on the part of the plant for these different aspects of it to work together. So here's a big old, I just thought I'd write all these out because it's so wild. Each one of these words is an herbal action. And this is a pretty comprehensive list. The ones I highlighted aren't special. They just, I wanted them to be more visible over the picture. So if you gaze upon this list, like you'll see some words that are probably familiar to you. just from like reading medicine bottle labels our whole lives. Anti-inflammatory, for example, that's something ibuprofen does. That's also something that turmeric does. Aromatic is how we describe how food smells in the kitchen. And it's also like a scientific thing that happens when we're smelling a certain food or plant. I'm not going to go into what each one of these is, but we'll talk about a couple here in a minute. So I wanted to really add some context for our like intentions. Hi, thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Some intentions for working with plant medicine in that around safety and like, yeah, our intentions. So a holistic constitutional assessment of like what's going on in my whole body, like not just my stomach that hurts right now, or not just the headaches that I have sometimes. So just like with allopathic or like kind of westernized medicine, alternative medicine, like working with plants, is not a magical cure-all. I have not been cured by herbs, even after years of working with them. Like they're a tool that and they're beings that I work with and that I get to know. But yeah, it's not a magical cure-all. It can't fix your whole life, which is kind of the way that it's talked about often, like that herbal medicine is talked about, is like, if you just start my herbal protocol, my 8-month herbal protocol, along with this whole foods diet, then you can expect to experience X, Y, and Z, like definitively. That's not like at all how I see things, or how I don't know, how I think things should be, information should be presented to people. Herbal medicine can cause harm or distress to us if not worked with carefully. So part of getting to know, well, where do I start? What herbs might be best for me, or my conditions, or my symptoms, is like figuring out, getting to know yourself and establishing what your baseline is. So what's your baseline of anxiety? What's your baseline of digestion, or sleep, or social energy, or your daily limits or capacity? Beginning to listen to your body and hearing and like figuring out what it needs, determining if there's anything changeable internally or externally that might be affecting or blocking your health, or your happiness, or your peace of mind, your safety. Something, for example, that like acupuncture has really helped me with is learning through somebody else's expertise and like wisdom of being able to listen to my body and tune into it, like learning where blockages live in my body. And that's something that can be really difficult if, like I said before, like if you're a trauma survivor, or if you struggle to tune in with your own needs. So working with your practitioners, whether that's an herbalist or an MD, an ND, an acupuncturist, an LMT, massage therapist, or a talk therapist, or an energy worker, to help to highlight issues, outline some health goals, general or specific, and like prioritize your next steps with intention. So just like, I think about it in terms of like getting, like I get blood work every year or every other year, just to like, because I can, and because I get a printout that literally tells me information about what's going on inside my body, that I can talk with my doctor about and be like, oh, I should be like heavily supplementing vitamin D this year. This doesn't look good. Or my red platelet count is really low, or, you know, whatever it is. Getting that information can help you know what is the best way to affect change in an imbalance in your body. And how can you do that if you don't have the right information? So that's part of how we can move forward. That being said, I'm going to talk about nervine herbs. So that nervine is a word from that big word list we just saw. Nervine is a class of herbs, and it's a plant remedy that has some sort of beneficial effect on the nervous system. And there are a few different subclasses of nervine herbs that we're going to talk about. And these definitions are like written out in your notes too. So you'll have that to kind of look back on, and we'll zoom through that part a little bit so we can get to the end. But yeah, nervine herbs, I have a very frazzled nervous system. So I work with nervine herbs a lot. They're commonly used to treat stress, anxiety, depression, insomnia, and addiction. And they can restore restfulness and balance in the body in a bunch of different ways. And lots of herbs fall into this category, but some are stronger than others. Some nervines, it's important to mention, can be really supportive for helping people ease off of or onto pharmaceutical medicine. So if you're like going off of something that you've been on for more than a couple months, you could maybe talk with your doctor about adding in like a milky oats tincture or something else to help ease the jaggedness of how harsh that experience can be. Something that I focus on in my practice when I do consultations with people is I really love, I'm a person who has been harmed like repeatedly by being on either misprescribed or like overprescribed pharmaceutical medications. I love pharmaceutical meds. They're really useful. They're very beneficial, but we all have experiences with them and with ourselves or in our families, and we've seen how they can harm people. And because I have that lived experience, it's something that is really important to me to help be able to, I don't consider myself an expert, but like to be able to help people work with nervine herbs to go through that process in hopefully a gentler way. So this is a subclass of nervine herbs. It's nervine tonics. It's also known as one of the coolest, longest words in herbalism that I love, a tropho-restorative. And it kind of means like that a tropho-restorative is specific to the tissues of your body or a specific organ of your body. So tropho-restoratives help you to rebuild your baseline and to feed or nourish your nervous system in some way. So like for cases of like extreme burnout or nervous debility, systemic exhaustion, long-term stress or trauma, you can work with tropho-restoratives like St. John's wort, Brahmi, milky oats, blue vervain, gotu kola, borage. I have almost all of those on the table over there. You can work with those over like a fairly long period of time to help strengthen and restore tissues directly, which is something that this is really interesting to me, is there is not an equivalent in pharmaceutical medicine of this class of medicine. There is nothing you can get at a pharmacy or a Walgreens that does this thing to your body, where it is restorative and rebuilding in such a nourishing and like gentle way. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna ask, I'm assuming all of the plants listed there don't have the same type of like effect?
Mm-hmm.
So that's correct?
That's correct.
I'm curious, what are the different little nuances that are the differences?
Oh, that is for you to learn about on your own. Yeah. Asking what the difference is between these plants.
Well, I'm thinking like specifically in terms of the effect they have on you.
In terms of the effect they have on you. So these are all tropho restorative. So they all, what they have in common is that, as you know, kind of what's listed on the slide, which is strengthening, restoring tissue health, rebuilding resilience. They all kind of have, one way I'd phrase it is like each plant on and off of this list like has their own energetics and their own medicinal actions. So St. John's wort is a pretty common herb, and it is really different than gotu kola. I don't know if I can get into like too many more specifics, but yeah, they all have differences, but they share this thing in common. They share this action in common. Does that answer your question to a degree? Okay, sure. You got it.
Sorry, can you use them? Are they mostly for like trauma and stress, or can you use them for injuries and things too? Like if I were to sprain my wrist, I'd use these for that, or?
Yeah, that's a person to person, that's all subjective,
For
it's
sure.
all relative, for sure, just based on like what you're dealing with, and that's something you'd work with an herbalist to find out, or you're like, you know what, I want to know more about these, but I want to know about how to use them effectively for like what I'm dealing with right now. And that's something you'd like schedule a consult with an herbalist to talk about. If you go ask your doctor, if you go ask a medical doctor about it, they're going to be like, I think it's all bunk, or they'll be like, I know one of those, but it's up to you. Yeah. So much like healthy food nourishes your body and helps you to feel whole and energized, Nervine tonics can help to restore a depleted, a stressed, or an anxious nervous system. Yeah, so this is more Nervine tonic herbs. There's chamomile, is that little yellow, beautiful yellow and white flower. This is just more about what Nervine tonic herbs can do. They can bring balance to the body by easing stress and anxiety over a period of time. And they often have very nutritive components too. So they're often like milky oats, which the dried version of them is on the table over there. Milky oats are like this godsend in the herbal medicine world that are really special because they're actually you can only gather them during like 2 weeks of summer, and then they dry up and fall off, and they're not as, the dry version is fine, but it's like, they're like this wet little pod, and they're incredibly nutrient like rich and dense. So what you do is you gather them when they're wet, and that's what was on the last slide was milky oats. So see these oat tops up top, that's what's in one of the little bowls over there. And then the stalk is oat straw, which is also, it's like full of magnesium and silica and like manganese. Hi, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, so milky oats is an amazing medicine to work with for its mineral content. Skullcap is another great one. I don't know if I brought any today. I don't think I did. Skullcap is wonderful for sleep, for insomnia, and for kind of racing thought anxiety. Like it's specific to racing thoughts, along with passion flower. Both of those are good for when you're like really frazzled or feel like you're spinning out, kind of a thing. Chamomile is wonderful because it's safe for almost everyone, unless you have a ragweed allergy. It's really baby safe. It's great for calming babies. Often like folks will make chamomile baths to like bathe an infant or a toddler in. It's very calming. And it's just so gentle. It's really great topically too, for IBS, and also nightmares and general GI issues. Then there's Nervine relaxants. Nervine relaxants, I like this old-timey nerve and brain tonic advertisement here. I love old-timey herbal medicine advertisements. I think they're really funny. So like in the massage therapy world, we talk about how like the issues are in the tissues. When we're working with Nervine relaxants, which are often heavier and more sedative than the other herbs we just talked about. Thinking about how when your physical body is at ease, the psyche can be at ease, your spirit can be at ease, and you often can't have one without the other. Like if your body is like tense like this, meditation, like in the moment, might help you unwind a little bit. But working with a Nervine relaxant like lavender, hops, or wood betony, skullcap, passion flower, kava kava, or linden, can be a really wonderful way to help with like panic attacks or anxiety attacks or like very acute moments of like stress, panic, or overwhelm. The caution with these is like if you were taking a benzodiazepine, you don't want to rely on it every single day for the long term, because like if you're, for example, if you're a depressed person and you have a very depressed constitution, like taking a hops tincture every day, all day, is just going to make you like, like putting heaviness on top of heaviness can often like counteract the effect of like what you're actually trying to do. So that's something to think about with these. Like kava kava is wonderful. It's super useful to have on your shelf for like, if you're somebody who does get panic attacks and you want to have something on hand that's not a more extreme or intense like drug or medicine. They can be wonderful because they're not only do they have the medicinal action, but they're like very spiritually soothing. And these are also, I will say for anybody who also deals with insomnia, 3 to really think about our hops, skullcap, and passion flower. Skullcap and passion flower especially are great because skullcap you can take during the daytime without it making you pass out or go to sleep. And both skullcap and passion flower are great for like kind of the monkey mind, like racing thoughts state of being. And with basically everything on this list except for lavender and wood betony, like check online to make sure that whatever drugs you're taking are not contraindicated with these. Like if you're taking a benzo, you should not also be taking kava kava at the same time, because they can overload your system and like cause a drug interaction. Oh, and then here's a picture of the milky oat tops when they're fresh, like harvested in the basket. These are borage flowers. Borage is, we see borage is for courage. It has these lovely like purple or like purpley bluey flowers. The little pointy part in the middle, they're like star flowers, and the little pointy part is the seeds in the middle. And they're so sweet and lovely. There's some on the table over there. It's a really nice, like heart energetic, supportive herb. And it's also really gentle. And it grows all over Portland. They're really common here. they self-seed pretty easily, so you'll see them on herbicides and things. Passion flower, which I was just talking about, what planet did that come from? Somebody sent that here. It's an alien. They're an alien. I love them. They look like this, and they grow in this part of the country pretty easily. So, you know, if you're wandering around Southeast Portland, sometimes you'll see one. They're passion flower vines. They often like grow up like on fences or gates, and they're so like, don't you want to get to know that guy? Who are they? What's their deal? I'm just obsessed with that. I'm just obsessed with passion flower.
They're so wild.
They're so wild. And then the fruit is also a medicinal food. Like you probably had like passion fruit juice. It's that plant, same plant. It's like an orange kind of bulby, kind of looks like an apricot, like a long apricot. Delicious. It tastes amazing. Yeah, I never knew it came from that plant. So passion flower is like, I think I just love them because it's like they're made for me. I think it can be really useful for ADHD symptoms, for opioid withdrawal symptoms, for kind of general body pain and tension, and like fibromyalgia symptoms. And also for, yeah, same thing. It's a little bit more sedative than skull cap, but you can take it during the daytime without it knocking you out. And it's lovely as a tea as well.
Can I ask which ADHD symptoms was it? I don't know.
Kind of, I feel like I haven't used it for that, like personally. For me, I have ADHD and insomnia and fibromyalgia. So like, I couldn't tell you like which thing it helps the most, but I think the frazzled and like scattered state of mind that can often be like really spinny, it helps to like bring that down, to like turn the volume knob down. And that's what a lot of these plants we're talking about can actually do on different levels of the body. Is like, if your pain is at a 10 every day, it can maybe turn that down to a 7 and help you move forward. Like it might not cure you entirely of all your woes, but it can be really helpful for yeah, just for easing things and turning it down a little bit. And I wanted to mention lemon balm because lemon balm kind of looks like any other guy you see like growing around town. It grows everywhere here. It's a very common, a lot of people kind of see it as a weed, but it's so gentle. It's generally safe for kids. And I wanted to mention because energetically, it's really resonant for like healing sexual trauma and for kind of like nourishing that like aspect of the self, and also as a tonic for the heart and circulatory system. Lemon balm's like a really gentle, it's delicious as a tea, and it's really nice as a it's safe for like anxiety and panic attacks too, for daytime anxiety support and also for insomnia. And then real briefly, just want to give a nod to nervine stimulants, which is another subclass of nervine. I don't want to talk too much about them because honestly, I think most people need more relaxants than they need stimulants. Because if you're able to get better quality rest, if you're able to focus on your sleep, then you will need fewer stimulants during the day. So, you know, if you're already feeling anxious because you have so much to do, and then you drink a 20-ounce iced coffee, you know what that does to your system. And it's like, well, what else can I do? This is the thing that's available to me. Well, there are other options. And just want to like open that window for thinking about different ways that we can affect our systems throughout the day and not that we often like can rebalance our energies by not rocketing through the roof on caffeine. But it's worth mentioning that like coffee is a nervine stimulant, like that is a plant medicine that we utilize regularly. And so is cola nut, so is black tea, chocolate. Rosemary can be really stimulating for most people. I know a fair number of people who make like a strong rosemary tea instead of coffee in the morning. Hi, thank you so much. And then a little bit about adaptogenic herbs, which these are on your notes too. The main point is just that this is another class of herbs. They're often complementary to nervine herbs. So often you'll see supplements that are sold that have like lavender and passion flower and ashwagandha and holy basil all together, because these herbs can all work really synergistically with each other. The main difference is that adaptogenic herbs can often be taken in higher doses over a longer period of time, versus nervine herbs you're often working with for like shorter periods of time and in slightly smaller doses. And adaptogenic herbs function in the body by restoring hormones and by balancing cortisol. Whereas nervines help to manage stress in a different way by directly affecting our tissues and the central nervous system. I've been reading about adaptogenic herbs for like a really long time and working with them, and I literally didn't know this until last week when I was like rewatching some videos about adaptogens. Just this first line here, which is that adaptogens are HPA axis regulators. So our stress response, like that specific mechanism in the body, adaptogens regulate that. So chronic stress will dysregulate this axis, which puts a huge strain on the body because it like throws all the other systems out of whack. And that's kind of how we wind up in long-term exhaustion and burnout. If you've ever heard of cortisol, or like people talking about managing their cortisol levels, that's often what's happening. And adaptogens can modulate that stress response in a longer term way. So I was talking about ashwagandha earlier. I have tried working with ashwagandha so many times, and it just might not be the right herb for me. And it also, I'm impatient and I run out of it every time. And usually when I work with ashwagandha, I'm like, I know everybody loves you, but I am not feeling it. It just doesn't resonate for me. And part of that might be because you're not going to see as immediate results with most adaptogens. It takes between 3 to 6 weeks for you to notice. Sometimes they can be immediately grounding and you're like, wow, I feel better. And for the most part, it tends to take a longer period of time. So adaptogens include holy basil, the ginseng family, ashwagandha, eleuthero, astragalus, and also medicinal mushrooms like lion's mane and cordyceps. There are over 70 types of herbs that are classified as adaptogens. So quite a lot. There's a lot to choose from. And then I just wanted to end with some friends that I have on the table over there. These are some heart openers. I don't remember if I wrote these down in the notes, but these are gentler medicines that most of these are either a nervine or an adaptogen. They're very common. These are all herbs that can do a lot of different things, but it can kind of often work through blockages in the system. Whether you see that as like the heart meridian or as like the heart chakra. yeah, these are some friends you can work with to kind of open yourself up to receiving and to giving and receiving like love and care. I don't know what this reishi mushroom is growing on, but it looks really weird. And then this is hawthorn berry and leaf. I have hawthorn leaf and flower on the table over there. It's a great like circulatory tonic, like literally works on the heart. And then this is a linden tree and flower. And talked about this. This is what we have on the table over there, and that's me. And this concludes my 7-day-long intensive on Herbal Allies for self-care. Thank you all so much for sticking around. I really appreciate it. Yay. You all made it to the end of boot camp, so now we all have to fight. Were there any questions online or IRL that I can help to answer?
So if I can come back to mine, I was really curious about like the individual effects of all of the different the Nervine tonics. If somebody else has a question.
Yeah, who is one moment. Corey is, and are there any questions? Is there anyone still on the Zoom? And two, are there any questions that I can answer from that? Oh yeah. Let's look at that chat. Oh. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Ooh. Thank you to everyone online for coming. I will chat about sending out some slides to specific people and also sending out notes if anyone wants them.
Yeah, thank you, and definitely go.
Yeah, please do. And if anyone in the Zoom also wants a tea like sent to them or wants to pick one up,
Yeah.
that is
maybe some like basic blends and have it be available for people to pick up.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
thank you. Can we do another round of applause?
Thanks for hanging in there.
That was wonderful. I mean, honestly, just the amount of that you covered in that time, like phenomenal. Just
Oh, thank you.
so comprehensive.
I tried.
You really did. Please take some time to go.
Yeah.
Follow Tavi on Instagram.
And yeah, I took over an herbal medicine podcast recently this year, and I have a Patreon that's associated with it. It's called Rise